Why hello there and welcome to another episode of We Need to Talk About ... and confession time.
We mucked up.
Yes, we forgot to film the intro in the bunker, so we're actually doing it in the pub afterwards.
Sorry, so it's going to go incredibly wrong. You're going to get the review from us in the past around about, I don't know, what's over 5 o'clock now, so around about 4 hours ago.
Yes.
So,
and then you'll come back to us.
You'll come back to us now. So, us 4 hours ago, we'll give you the review, and then us now we'll give you the after bit from what we did 4 hours ago.
We haven't done one of these since December, so we're a bit out of practice.
It's all wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey, but you'll be fine, don't worry about it.
As always.
Doctor Who reference?
Oh God, not another Doctor Who reference.
Splink!
Well, as always, I am the Big Daddy D, David Mabley, and
nice! And I am not the Big Daddy D, I am Luke Murphy instead.
And that gives you a clue what we're going to cover in this episode.
Well, we're having spasms.
Yes. Well, let's go back to past us, and we'll take it from there.
See you in a bit.
Bruce Lee is truly the stuff of legend, forever changing the way that movies were made in Hong Kong and across the rest of the world. His box office success in Asia during the early 70s was so huge that Hollywood could not ignore what a phenomenon the man had become. Such was his presence and his influence that Warner Brothers approached Golden Harvest with the offer to make a huge co-production together. The result was Enter the Dragon. Unfortunately, Bruce Lee passed away suddenly on July 20th, 1973, and never got to see the impact that this film had, not just on the Hong Kong film industry, but the world over.
The fact that before Enter the Dragon, Lee had only made a handful of films, The Big Boss, Way of the Dragon and Fist of Fury, and had shot around 40 minutes of another, Game of Death, only added to the sense of loss that his passing caused. Yes, there were the TV appearances. He was co-lead of The Green Hornet, had regular guest spots in the detective series Lawn Street. Add to this, Lee almost certainly was the one to come up with the idea for the programme that would eventually become Kung Fu. But the fact that he passed away early in his career means we get left with a lot of what-if scenarios, and the most famous of these is Game of Death, Lee's unfinished film that was later completed in 1978, 5 years later.
Unfortunately, it also left us with something that is far more unsavoury. In a tactic that can only be described at best as deceptive marketing, and at worst complete and utter deplorable lies, a number of film studios across mainland China, Hong Kong and Taiwan took some rather morally questionable decisions. Fearing that a martial arts movie without the genre's most famous star would not be financially successful, they decided to hire a number of look-alike actors to star in imitation Bruce Lee martial arts films throughout the 70s and 80s. These Bruce Lee exploitation films would later become known as Bruceploitation.
Which brings us to our first review of the new year. What we're going to do is we're going to take a look first at Game of Death, and then look at Bruceploitation as a whole, and how martial arts films moved on from this period into an arguably bigger boom period from the late 1970s onwards. And in our last part, because yes, we're doing a trilogy, we'll look at the slightly forgotten gem from a Hong Kong cinema legend that you could argue has surpassed Lee as being the most recognised martial arts movie star in the world.
However, once again, I feel that we're getting a little ahead of ourselves.
Just a smidge.
Before we can actually talk about the version of Game of Death that actually ended up being completed and released in cinemas, we first need to go back in time to 1972, when Bruce originally started making the film before his untimely passing. The original story of Game of Death has Bruce Lee starring as Hai Chen, a former martial arts champion that is approached by a Korean underworld gang to retrieve an artifact that is of great wealth and value. The artifact is kept at the top of a pagoda where firearms are prohibited and under heavy guard by highly skilled martial artists. It's never actually revealed what this artifact is in any of the footage that exists.
The gang boss wants Chen to be part of a group of other martial artists that will enter the pagoda and attempt to retrieve the artifact for them. This would actually be the second group to try to do so, as the first attempt with a previous group had failed. Chen is unable to refuse this mission as his younger sister and brother are being held captive by the Koreans, so Chen has no choice but to take part in this game of death. Chen and the group of other martial artists make their way up the 5 levels of the pagoda, encountering a different challenge on each floor. A bit like a video game, really. And funnily enough, this same idea would be copied for the video game Kung Fu Master. Bruce only shot footage for the 3rd to 5th floors of the pagoda. There was supposed to be 5 floors in total, 6 if you include the ground floor, which was originally planned to have a huge fight scene against multiple opponents, led by Bolo Young. All black belts in karate, likely similar to what we'd seen in Fist of Fury.
The first floor was supposed to be against a master of Hapkido, with Hwang In-sik stated to play the Guardian, a master of a kick-oriented style. Hwang had previously appeared as an opponent for Bruce in Way of the Dragon, alongside Bob Wall and Chuck Norris. He also turned up to give Jackie Chan's characters a few problems with his movies as well. The second floor was to be against a master of praying mantis kung fu, to be played by Bruce's longtime student and good friend, Taki Kimura. On the 3rd floor, the Temple of the Tiger, Lee faces his close friend and student, Dan Inosanto, who uses sticks and nunchucks. And this would actually be the first time that we'd see a nunchuk versus nunchuk battle on screen.
I think it's the little sticks. Is it a screamer skin?
Yes,
That's
that's
right.
right.
Is it pronounced a screamer?
The 4th floor, the Temple of the Dragon, he faces Korean Hapkido master Ji-Han Jae. And then finally, on the 5th and final floor, he faces the massive Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in the Temple of the Unknown. Bruce's opponents and some of his allies are defeated because of a flaw in their fighting style, but Chen is able to keep advancing due to using a fighting style that doesn't have a style. One that has fluid movements, unpredictability, and interception, with no fixed positions and adjusting his style accordingly in order to defeat his enemies. When he finally encounters a style that mirrors his own in the final battle, Chen is only able to defeat his giant foe by exploiting his greatest weakness, an unusually high sensitivity to light. Of course, this is all part of Bruce's own martial arts philosophy, which had led to him creating his own style, Jeet Kune Do, literally known as the Way of the Intercepting Fist.
He's essentially just showing off a bit here, isn't he?
That's true, but I do love some of the facial expressions he makes.
How'd you like that?
How do you like that?
Immediately after defeating Kareem, and thus the final opponent, Chen turns around and goes back down the staircase heading out of the pagoda. Despite all the talk of something waiting up at the top of the now unguarded final flight of stairs, there's no footage of anyone going up to retrieve it, as Bruce never filmed the ending for this movie. There's nothing to explain how this will affect Tien or his captive siblings, or what the prize was at the end. So, production of Game of Death was halted when Bruce was offered the role in Enter the Dragon, and although he did intend to go back to filming Game of Death in September of 1973, sadly he passed away in July of that year, and he never got to complete the film that could have been his very best. The director of Enter the Dragon, Robert Klaus, would later take Lee's incomplete film footage shot in 1972 and then create a new storyline around it. Now, Bruce in death had become even more popular than when he was alive, and people were keen to see more footage of their hero in action, and thus Game of Death was successful in Hong Kong. It's rather unclear, however, how it fared internationally. I mean, American movie critics and fans were not happy with the finished film, finding it to be in very, very bad taste and exploitative of Bruce Lee's good name in order to make a quick buck. They would be correct.
It's hard not to compare Robert Klaus's version of Game of Death with the film that Bruce Lee began shooting in 1972, and obviously comparisons are unfavourable. On one hand, you've got the reality of a mythical masterpiece in the making that was never finished, and on the other hand, you've got the reality of a film that was awkwardly spliced together using bits and pieces of unused footage.
Bruce, and a couple of doubles in large sunglasses, fake beards and shadowy lighting, plays Billy Lowe, a martial arts actor and stuntman who is persecuted by a mysterious crime syndicate out to exploit him for money. Billy refuses to be intimidated by the syndicate, so the crime boss orders his assassination to make an example of him. After they shoot him and leave him for dead on a film set using footage from the ending of Fist of Fury, Billy gets reconstructive surgery, fakes his demise, and then takes revenge from beyond the grave.
From there, we cut to actual stock footage of Bruce Lee's funeral. This is the ultimate in bad taste. This, there's absolutely no need for, and I cannot forgive the filmmakers for taking this route, especially considering that Bruce Lee's surviving relatives, including his wife, were in the audience when this was first shown. You would not get anything like this happening these days. Like in the case of Paul Walker, who sadly died during the making of the last Fast and Furious movie that they made.
I don't think it was during. I think it was before. I think it was before. I think they had made 6. They were prepping 7.
Yeah.
And then he passed away.
But what they did was, they used like body doubles, in some cases his own brothers, and they used sort of CGI and stuff that had already been sort of filmed in order to still put him in the film. Now, can you imagine if Fast and the Furious 7 started by saying that Paul Walker's character had died and they used actual footage of his funeral to show that? You know, can you imagine if the next Star Wars film shows and they say that Princess Leia's died and they show actual footage of Carrie Fisher's funeral? You wouldn't do that.
No.
What person in their right mind would think that that was an acceptable practice? Now, when we later come on to some of the Bruce-exploitation movies in our next episode that we're doing, you will see that this certainly wasn't the first time that footage of Bruce Lee's funeral was used in a movie. The infamous Exit the Dragon, Enter the Tiger, starring Bruce Lee imitator Bruce Lee, spelt with an I rather than 2 E's, had actually done the same thing 2 years previously. Now, perhaps this was the type of practice that filmmakers could get away with in some of the cheaper Hong Kong movies. But Game of Death was supposed to be another Hollywood co-production between themselves and Golden Harvest. You would have thought that they would have known better rather than to stoop to levels like this.
Throughout the movie, shots are done so that the fake Bruce Lee has their back to the camera, or has their face obscured. I mean, other times they attempt to splice in some footage from other Bruce Lee films to use as reaction shots for new conversations. Sometimes they use optical effects to make it look like Bruce is sat in the same room as the other actors, or has a towel wrapped around his shoulders, and this just looks ridiculous. The effects are hilariously bad, especially when you come to watch it on DVD, where it really does become noticeable.
It becomes noticeable that they've used a cardboard cutout and sellotaped it to the fucking mirror. This isn't like within the first 5 minutes of the film, and you sort of think, okay, this is weird. Now, these silly quirks and questionable use of footage aside, the movie does have some very stylish photography. There's plenty of action, and there's some gorgeous neon street settings. Bizarrely enough, the plot of the film does somehow work. But there is an eerie atmosphere to the whole film. I mean, it certainly doesn't help where the scene where Billy Lowe is shot on a film set is very similar to what would unfortunately happen to Bruce's own son, Brandon Lee, on the set of The Crow some 15 years later.
Billy makes his way through the members of the gang one by one, seeking his revenge before finally tracking down the syndicate at their headquarters. And this is where the original footage of the pagoda comes into place. The film is cut to make it look like the top floors of the pagoda are in fact part of a Chinese restaurant that the crime syndicate owns.
Now, in order to fit in with Bruce's original footage, Billy acquires the yellow jumpsuit at this point in the film from a biker gang, who for some reason are all driving around on motorbikes with like bright green and bright yellow tracksuits on. You know, I mean,
Have they been to the Godfrey Ho wardrobe?
I mean, talk about subtle, you know.
This is a new definition of the word subtle I've never heard of before.
Going around, yeah, I've got a biker gang driving around looking like bananas, you know.
Could be the banana split.
Oh, bananas in pyjamas. Now, despite not wearing this outfit for long in the Robert Klaus version, this became one of Bruce Lee's most iconic appearances, later appearing in all sorts of other forms of pop culture, including video games like Tekken and Sleeping Dogs, as well as movies like Quentin Tarantino's Kill Bill Volume 1.
3 endings were shot for the movie. The common ending was Billy Lowe confronting the crime boss at the end and him falling to his death in classic villain style. Other endings show Billy being arrested afterwards, although the police don't seem to be in the slightest bit surprised that this famous actor, believed to be dead, is actually alive. Another ending was after Billy defeated the crime boss, that he and his girlfriend get on a ferry back to America to live happily ever after. Now, here we go. Klaus wanted to get some of Bruce Lee's famous friends into this film, such as Steve McQueen, George Lazenby, along with actors that had appeared in previous films with him, like Chuck Norris and Bob Wall. Lazenby, best known for playing James Bond in the best Bond film ever, not necessarily the best Bond, but the best Bond film ever, and I will fight anybody to the death that says otherwise. He was originally in talks with Bruce over appearing in the film when Lee was making it.
He was to be Bruce's teacher, I believe. Yeah.
However, he turned down the opportunity to appear in Klaus's version, and he certainly wasn't the only one. Many of Bruce's friends wanted absolutely no part in Klaus's movie, thinking that he would be in bad taste.
However, Bob Wall, who played a villain in both Way of the Dragon and Enter the Dragon, did come back to play evil kickboxer Carl Miller, and one of Lee's fight choreographers, actor-director Sammo Hung, whom Lee defeats in the opening scene of Enter the Dragon, came back to choreograph some of the newly filmed fight scenes, including an excellent one between Sammo and Bob Wall. Sammo was actually credited as co-director in some regions where the film was released, and he deserves it, as the fight scenes he shot are superb. The one in particular between Carl Miller and Billy Lowe is so good, I actually thought it was Bruce Lee himself in the scene when I first watched it. Of course, it no doubt helps that in this particular scene, Sammo got his old mate Yang Biao in to play Bruce for this fight.
Chuck Norris did appear.
Inverted commas, yes.
Inverted commas. He did appear in the movie, but this was only through reusing clips of Way of the Dragon, something that Norris was not very happy about, and even threatened to take legal action, although the matter was later settled in court.
Well, if you believe the Chuck Norris facts, they tried to get away in a helicopter, but Chuck Norris just pointed at the helicopter and said bang, and it went down in flames. Don't mess with Chuck Norris.
Don't fuck with Chuck. Just don't fuck with Chuck.
Dan Inosanto came back to appear in some additional scenes in order to keep the continuity between Bruce's original version and Klaus's new version, but Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was not having any of it. He refused to return, again believing that it was in bad taste. So another actor appeared in new scenes, one that looked nothing like him. One that was sat down in a shadowy corner somewhere to try and disguise that it obviously wasn't the same person.
They also seem to have completely forget about Jihan Jae though. He was completely cut out of some versions of the film, and even in the versions where his fight scene was included, there was no attempt to integrate him into the rest of the film.
Poor lad. Several years later, Bruce Lee historian John Little put together a wonderful documentary called Bruce Lee, A Warrior's Journey. This revealed the original footage and the original story of the Game of Death, as well as a fairly in-depth biography of Lee and the filming of Game of Death itself. Originally released on VHS and later DVD, the documentary can now be found on the 2004 special edition DVD release of Enter the Dragon, and is well worth a watch if you haven't done so already. I believe that it may be on YouTube as well. It's really a must for Bruce Lee fans, and really, I can only recommend that you watch that instead of watching this movie.
You would have thought the Game of Death would be the cut-off point where Bruceploitation ended. In actual fact, the opposite happened, and it just carried on going, even to the point where Game of Death itself got a sequel. However, we'll leave it there for that. We'll leave it there for now, because we'll be certainly talking a lot more about Bruceploitation in our next episode.
Little fellow, you must have given up the hope of living.
On the contrary, I do not let the word death bother me.
Same here, baby.
Then what are you waiting for?
The original 40 minutes of that Bruce Lee originally filmed makes for fascinating viewing, and I would recommend that you go and watch that.
Yeah.
The actual film itself, there's going to be a lot of fast forwarding that you're probably going to want to do. Some of the non-Bruce Lee fight scenes are really good. For example, Bob Wall against Sammo Hung, and Bob Wall against Young Yo playing Bruce Lee are good for a watch. The rest of it, give it a fast forward.
It is a bit of a strange one because obviously this is not the version released is not what was originally intended.
Yeah.
And more so in this than any other film. So it is a bit strange. Being critical and in some cases disparaging about a Bruce Lee film, as tangentially as it is not good to us, to be fair. But again, if you want to see what could have been, see the 40 minutes of footage that was shot by Lee. Give the rest of it a wide berth, to be fair.
To be honest, if you're a Bruce Lee fan, chances are you may already have a box set that has Game of Death included anyway, so it will sit quite nicely on your shelf alongside Big Boss, Mr. Fury and Way of the Dragon. And if you have the anniversary edition of Enter the Dragon, then the Bruce Lee documentary, A Warrior's Journey, is included on there anyway. And really, those 40 minutes are the only thing that you really need to consider.
Which basically, the main thing to come out of this, here we are, we're actually sort of coming out and saying don't see a film.
Yeah.
Which kind of like goes against sort of everything I think that we've done, regardless of what the film has been. We've always said, go and see it and make your own mind up. With this one, don't go and see it.
No, but watch the 40 minutes.
Watch the 40 minutes.
Or watch the documentary.
Watch the 40 minutes footage that Lee shot. Go and watch the documentary, obviously, A Warrior's Journey, which is very, very good. Go and watch Big Boss, go and watch Mr. Fury, go and watch Way of the Dragon, Enter the Dragon. If you can find any other bits and pieces that Bruce Lee was starring in, Green Hornets, I think
Bond Street.
I don't think there's...
Be like water, my friend.
Indeed. I don't think
Be
there's...
like...
well,
that's like water, isn't it?
Well, it'll do.
It's wet.
It's wet. It becomes the glass.
Be like pale ale, my friend.
Be like pale ale.
Put it into a teapot, it becomes the teapot. Although you've probably got a bit of a drinking problem if you put it in the teapot.
Well, yeah, strange things have happened.
Bruce Lee's own son, Brandon Lee, once said, he's quoted as saying, Game of Death is 40 minutes of hope, the rest is garbage. I think he's been a little harsh because some of Sammo Hung's stuff is really, really good.
Yeah.
However, because of his exploitative nature, because of the use of footage from other films, because of the use of footage from his funeral, which is something that should never have happened.
And more on that in the next episode. Because it gets worse.
I feel that what was actually released as Game of Death I mean, I've had a few drinks that I can be a bit more bolder. The released version of Game of Death, I'm going to give a thumbs down. However, the 40 minutes of footage that Bruce Lee did, and the documentary A Warrior's Journey, that I will give a resounding thumbs up.
I will mirror that, to be honest with you. The 40 minutes is basically Bruce Lee doing his thing.
Yeah, and it is wonderful.
Yeah.
Absolutely wonderful.
It's his direction, it's his choreography, it's his fight choreography, etc. We made light of it, I think, in the main review, but it is Lee showing off, basically.
It is.
No. It is Lee
How
showing
like
off.
that?
It's Lee showing off about Jeet Kune Do. You know,
He's not just beating other martial artists, he's beating other martial art styles
yes,
by having no style.
yeah. My style, which is no style,
Yeah.
is better than your style, which is a style.
Which is in Enter the Dragon as well. My style, you can call it the art of fighting without fighting.
Yes, it's true. The art of fighting without fighting. The art of fighting with fighting.
Yeah. So I feel that this episode's been a little bit sad in places because a lot of it's been reflected on what if.
Yeah, which on balance, considering this is the first review of the new year, we've kind of begun the year on a downer, and we haven't meant to be fair, we haven't meant to. It's just the way it's happened.
But don't worry folks, because in the next episode we're going to go back to having a bit of a laugh. Because next time we'll need to talk about Bruceploitation.
And
And we're going to touch upon various different Bruceploitation movies, films where various different Bruce Lee imitators pop
Yes.
up, you know, in completely sort of bonkers films where Bruce Lee's fighting everyone from Clint Eastwood and James Bond to Dracula and angry bulls and lions and things like that.
and these are in the years between his death and the release of Game of Death.
Yeah.
And beyond that.
And beyond that.
And beyond
And beyond
that
that.
as well. So there's something to look forward to, everybody.
There's a lot of weird stuff to come, I promise you. But that's all to come in the next episode,
Yeah.
which will be we need to talk about Bruceploitation. But until then, we will drink a toast to the man himself, the man, the myth, the legend, Bruce Lee. We salute you, sir. Until next time, I am the Big Daddy D,
I am Luke Murphy.
and we will catch you for the next episode of We Need to Talk About... ...
See you, everyone.
Goodbye.
Cheers now. Bye.
Ooh.